When my phone rang that morning, I thought it was just another ordinary call from my son, Leo. The kettle was whistling on the stove, and sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, warming the small jade plant I kept beside the sink. It was one of those quiet mornings that almost trick you into believing the world is gentle. I answered with a smile already on my lips. Leo. I was just about to call you. I've been dying to know, did you two finally pick a date? For a heartbeat there was silence on the line. Then I heard a woman's voice instead of his. Sierra's voice. Calm, cool, syrupy in that careful way she had when she wanted to sound polite but still keep her edge. Oh, Iris, she said lightly, we actually got married yesterday. It was just a tiny ceremony. We only invited special people. Her words hit me like a slap made of ice. Special people. I waited for her to laugh, to say she was joking, but she didn't. The teapot hissed until the sound filled the entire kitchen. I turned off the burner mechanically, my hand trembling as I lifted the kettle. You got married? I managed. Yesterday? Yes, Sierra said cheerfully. It was beautiful. Very intimate. Just family, you know? Family. The word twisted in my chest. I'm your family, I whispered. There was a pause, the kind that stretches so long you can hear the distance growing between two hearts. Then she said, we didn't want to make a big fuss, Iris. You understand, don't you? Leo's voice came faintly in the background. Tell her I'll call later. And then the line went dead. For a long moment I stood in my kitchen staring at nothing, the phone still pressed to my ear. The smell of scorched tea leaves filled the air. The wedding dress I had bought for her, soft rose chiffon, delicate lace sleeves, was hanging in my closet upstairs, waiting for a celebration that would never come. I had imagined that day so many times. I'd pictured walking down the aisle beside my son, smiling at Sierra, handing her the bouquet I'd arranged myself. I'd even saved $1,000 to give them as a wedding gift. Now every dream lay in ashes. I went to the window and looked out at the quiet street. The sky was too blue, the world too normal for what had just shattered inside me. For years I'd helped them with everything, paid their rent, filled their fridge, bought furniture, fixed their car when it broke down. I had always told myself it was what mothers did. When you love someone, you help. You give. You don't count. But that morning I counted every dollar in my head, and each one felt like a small betrayal of myself. That evening, I saw the photos. Sierra's parents, smiling proudly beside the newlyweds. Her sisters, raising champagne glasses. The venue glowed with fairy lights, white roses draped over every archway. Leo stood there in a crisp gray suit, arm around Sierra's waist, the same arm that had once hugged me tight after every school play, every scraped knee. And I wasn't there. The following week, Sierra called again. Her voice trembled just enough to sound pitiful. Iris, the rent is due, and the landlord is threatening to evict us. You forgot to make the transfer. Forgot. The word was almost funny. For years, I'd transferred that $500 like clockwork. Even when my pension came late, even when I had to skip groceries. Sierra, I said quietly, didn't I warn you that I only help special people? There was silence. I don't understand, she stammered. Yes, you do, I said, and hung up. It was the first time in 3 years that I didn't tremble after saying no. That night, I sat at my dining table surrounded by papers, bank statements, receipts, scribbled notes. I started adding numbers, each one a piece of my misplaced devotion. Rent, $18,000. Food and supplies, $7,200. Gifts, $3,000. Medical help, car repairs, furniture, another $5,000. $33,400. 33,400 reasons to stop pretending that money could buy love. When I finally went to bed, tears came, not of sadness but of fury and release. For years, I had let them treat me like an invisible wallet with a heartbeat. But now something inside me had shifted, something fierce and clear. I would never be that woman again. The next morning the mirror reflected a stranger, an older woman, yes, but one with fire in her eyes. Enough, I whispered to my reflection. Enough of being invisible. I brewed a cup of coffee and drank it slowly, savoring the quiet. For once, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder whether Leo had eaten breakfast or if Sierra needed groceries. The silence was mine. Later, I walked to the bank. Mr. Collins, the manager, had known me for years. He smiled as I approached. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale. Another transfer for your son?" "Not today," I said. "I'd like to cancel all automatic payments and block third-party access to my accounts." His smile faltered. "Are you sure? You've been helping them for so long." "I'm sure," I said. "I'm helping myself now." As he processed the request, my phone buzzed over and over. "Leo. Sierra." I turned it face down on the counter. Mr. Collins handed me the confirmation papers. "There," he said gently. "All done." He hesitated. "If you ever need someone to talk to, financial abuse happens more often than you'd think." I met his eyes. "Thank you, but I'm fine now." When I stepped out of the bank, the world felt lighter, as if the air itself had forgiven me for all the times I'd ignored it. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning my house, scrubbing floors, washing curtains, reclaiming every corner that had once felt like a waiting room for their visits. By evening, exhaustion settled over me, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that follows accomplishment rather than despair. That peace didn't last long. At dusk, 3 cars pulled up in front of my house. Through the window I saw Leo's familiar sedan, Sierra's little white coupe, and a black vehicle I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened. They had keys. I had given them keys long ago, back when trust came easily. I heard the door open. When I stepped into the living room, they were already there, Leo on the sofa, head in his hands, Sierra pacing, and a man in a gray suit rifling through my papers on the dining table. "What is going on?" I demanded. All 3 looked up, startled but not guilty enough. "Iris," Sierra said with that brittle sweetness. "Thank goodness you're home. This is Mr. Turner. He's an attorney. We're just trying to sort out your situation." "My situation?" Leo stood. "Mom, you canceled the transfers and blocked our access. We were worried something happened to you." Mr. Turner stepped forward, hand extended. "Mrs. Hale, I'm a family law attorney. Your children asked me to evaluate your capacity. They're concerned about your mental health." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I gathered my papers from the table. "You have no right to be in my house, and you certainly have no right to read my documents." "Mom," Leo said softly, "you've been acting strange. First, you cut us off without warning. Then you ignore our calls. We just want to help." Sierra's tone dripped false compassion. "Maybe loneliness is getting to you, Iris. At your age, confusion can sneak up on people. We're just trying to keep you safe." I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't worried. They were laying the groundwork to steal what was left of my independence. "I'm not confused," I said, my voice low but firm. "I've never been clearer in my life. Now all of you, out of my house." Mr. Turner's expression hardened. "Mrs. Hale, if your family has reason to believe you're no longer capable of managing your finances, they can petition for guardianship. I suggest you cooperate." "You have 30 seconds to leave before I call the police," I said. "And take your threats with you." Sierra's mask slipped. You can't do this to us, Iris. We counted on you. We have bills, obligations. Not my obligations, I interrupted. Not anymore. Leo's face twisted with anger. Mom, you'll regret this. You'll end up alone. I met his eyes. I already am. The difference is, this time it's by choice. They left with slammed doors and muttered curses. The silence that followed was almost holy. I sat down and laughed, shaky and breathless. I was shaking not from fear but from the thrill of freedom. The next day I called an attorney of my own, Mr. Weber, a calm, silver-haired man I'd met years ago after my husband's death. What they attempted, he said after I told him everything, is financial coercion. If they try again, we'll document every instance. You have rights, Iris. Don't let them intimidate you. I left his office with a folder full of legal documents and something even more valuable, courage. At the hardware store, I bought new locks. The owner, Mr. Summers, raised his eyebrows. Replacing them all? Yes, I said. Every single one. His son Ethan offered to install them and a full security system. You'll be able to see anyone who comes near your door, he said. Perfect, I replied. Especially if they come bearing family love. That evening, while I was making dinner, the phone rang again, an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Sierra's voice poured through the speaker, sugar mixed with venom. Iris, we just want to talk. Let's have dinner, celebrate our wedding together. We miss you. I called back. How much rent do you owe? A pause. 1,000. But that's not why I. Yes, it is, I said. You miss my money, not me. Iris, please. No, and I hung up. I cooked myself a small feast that night. Not out of celebration, but because for once I could. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the stars. The city hummed below like a living thing, unaware of the quiet revolution happening in one woman's heart. 2 days later, a knock sounded at my door. A woman around my age stood there holding a thermos. Hello, she said. I'm May Turner, from next door. I heard shouting the other night. Are you all right? Her kindness nearly undid me. I'm fine, I said, though my voice trembled. Please, come in. I'll make coffee. We sat together at my kitchen table, and for the first time in months, I told someone everything, the wedding, the betrayal, the threats. May listened quietly, her eyes gentle. I went through something similar with my son, she said when I finished. Cutting him off was the hardest thing I ever did. But eventually, he learned. Sometimes love has to look like distance. Her words wrapped around me like a blanket. I hadn't realized how starved I was for simple understanding. When she left, she squeezed my hand. You're stronger than you think, Iris. Don't let them make you doubt that. The days that followed felt like waking up after a long sleep. I went to the salon for the first time in over a year, let Cynthia, my old stylist, trim my hair and paint my nails. You look radiant, she said when we were done. Something good happen? Yes, I told her. I finally learned how to say no. On my way home, I passed the park where I used to take Leo when he was little. I could almost see his small hand in mine, hear his laughter echoing between the trees. For a moment, grief threatened to drown me. But then I remembered what May had said, sometimes love looks like distance. I whispered goodbye to the ghost of that little boy and walked on. One afternoon, while I was watering the garden, 3 cars stopped in front of my house again. Leo, Sierra, and 2 strangers stepped out. I didn't move from behind the window. Instead, I called Mr. Weber. They're here, I said. Stay inside, he replied. I'll call the police. The restraining order paperwork is ready. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived. I watched the officer speak to Leo. He gestured wildly, his face red. Sierra cried into her hands. The officer approached my door. "Ma'am," he said, "they'll leave now. If they return, call us immediately." Leo shouted from the street as he got into his car. "Mom, this is insane. We're your family." I stepped onto the porch, my voice steady. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits. Family doesn't break into homes. Sierra screamed, "You'll pay for this, Iris. We'll get what's ours." Mr. Weber, standing beside me, said evenly, "Any further communication must go through my office." They drove away, defeated for now. But I knew it wasn't over. That night May invited me for dinner. Her daughter was visiting, a cheerful woman who hugged her mother like she meant it. Watching them together hurt and healed me all at once. When May's daughter left, I said softly, "That's what love looks like." May smiled. "And that's what you deserve." The next weeks passed peacefully. I painted, gardened, even joined May's reading circle. But the peace didn't last. One Friday morning, the doorbell rang. On the camera screen stood a young woman in a blazer, holding a clipboard. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," she said. "I'm from the Department of Senior Services. We've received a report that you might be at risk. May I come in?" I knew instantly who had sent her. She showed me her ID. I let her inside. Refusal would only make things worse. She sat with perfect posture on my couch. "We've been informed that you've exhibited sudden financial changes, isolation, and paranoia, including installing unnecessary security devices. Can you tell me why?" Each phrase was a dagger crafted by Sierra's hand. "I'd like my lawyer present before answering any questions," I said. "This isn't an interrogation," she said smoothly. "If you have nothing to hide." I cut her off. "Then you won't mind waiting." Mr. Weber arrived 20 minutes later. The young woman paled slightly. He laid a folder on the table. "My client has been the victim of financial and emotional abuse," he said. "Here is documentation of every transfer she made to her son and daughter-in-law, $33,400 over 3 years. If anyone here needs investigating, it's not my client." The investigator's tone softened as she reviewed the evidence. She asked me a few questions about my finances, my health, my daily life. By the end, her professional detachment had melted into sympathy. "Mrs. Hale," she said, closing her folder, "you appear perfectly capable and independent. I'll be closing this case." After she left, I felt both vindicated and exhausted. Mr. Weber warned me, they're desperate now. They may try to file for guardianship. But we'll be ready. That night I sat by the window, watching rain smear the streetlights into gold rivers. My reflection stared back, older, wiser, unbroken. Somewhere out there, Leo was plotting another way to take what wasn't his. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I had lost my son, yes. But I had found something far more precious, myself. And that was worth every dollar. The morning after the investigator left, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the cup of coffee growing cold between my hands. Every time I thought the storm had passed, another wave came crashing in. For the first time in years, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just tired. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones and makes even breathing feel like work. May came by with fresh muffins and that soft, motherly smile she carried everywhere. "They won't stop," she said simply. "I know. But you won't stop either." I smiled faintly. "You make me sound like a warrior." "You are one," she said. "You just never realized it because you were fighting for everyone else instead of yourself." Her words sank deep. Maybe that was true. Maybe I'd been at war long before I noticed the battlefield. That afternoon, Ethan from the hardware store came by to finish installing the cameras. I watched him from the porch, the soft hum of his drill echoing through the quiet street. For years, I'd spent my money on protecting Leo and Sierra from the world. Now I was protecting myself from them. The irony wasn't lost on me. When he was done, he showed me the control panel. This system connects to your phone. You can see everything in real time. And if anyone tries to break in, the police are notified automatically. Perfect, I said. That means I can finally sleep. He smiled politely, but there was sympathy in his eyes. People could always tell when a woman had been hurt. There was something about the way she moved, cautious and deliberate, like someone who had learned the cost of trust. The next few days were quiet. Almost too quiet. I spent them rediscovering myself piece by piece. I cleaned out the attic, filled boxes with old baby clothes, toys, and photo albums. When I opened one box, I found Leo's childhood drawings, stick figures of him and me, hand in hand, under a sun too big for the sky. I traced my finger over the crayon lines until the paper blurred through my tears. I had been a good mother. I knew that, deep down. I had given everything I could. But somewhere along the way, I had mistaken giving for loving and sacrifice for connection. That night, I sat in the garden under the stars. The air smelled of damp earth and jasmine. I thought about Robert, my late husband, how proud he'd been when Leo was born, how he used to say, "Iris, our boy will always know we love him." I whispered into the darkness, "Did we do something wrong, Robert? Or did I?" The wind didn't answer, but I imagined he would have told me what May always did, "You did your best." That's all a mother can do. A week passed before the next blow arrived. I was painting in the living room, soft pastels on canvas, a habit that had become my therapy, when I heard tires screech outside. I peeked through the curtain. Sierra's car. And Leo's. My stomach tightened. I'd already installed the locks, the cameras, even the alarm system. But seeing them outside my home still made my pulse quicken. I didn't go to the door. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Weber. "They're back," I whispered. "Stay calm," he said. "Record everything. Don't open the door." I watched from the window as they walked up my driveway, Sierra shouting something I couldn't hear. Then Leo began pounding on the door. "Mom. Open up. We just want to talk." I didn't move. The camera's red light blinked steadily. Sierra pulled out her phone, probably recording herself too. "She's sick," I heard her say loudly. "She needs help." Then Leo tried the handle and cursed when it didn't budge. Minutes later, a police car pulled up. I saw the officer speak to them, calm and professional. He gestured toward the cameras, then toward their cars. Leo's face twisted with fury. Sierra started crying, those same crocodile tears she used so easily. Eventually, they left. Mr. Weber arrived half an hour later to check on me. "They're escalating," he said. "It's not about the money anymore. It's about control. They can't stand that you've broken free." "I don't understand how my own son can do this," I said, voice cracking. "They're desperate, Iris. And desperation makes people cruel." He looked around my living room, at the paintings drying on the walls, the vase of fresh flowers May had brought. "But you've created something beautiful here. Don't let them take that from you." I nodded, though fear still clung to me like a shadow. 2 weeks later, the letter came. It was late afternoon, and the postman handed me an envelope with official seals. My heart pounded as I read the words notice of petition for guardianship. Leo and Sierra were requesting to have me declared mentally incompetent and to be granted legal authority over my finances. I sat down hard in my chair. The paper trembled in my hands. For a few minutes, I couldn't breathe. It was one thing to be insulted, to be threatened, but this was war. They wanted to take my freedom. I called Mr. Weber immediately. "I was afraid of this," he said. "Don't panic. We'll fight it. They'll need evidence, and everything we've documented will work in your favor." "Evidence?" I laughed bitterly. "They'll invent it if they have to." And that's exactly what they did. Within days, Mr. Weber uncovered what they were planning: fabricated medical records, statements from neighbors claiming I'd been acting erratically, and even a false report from my pharmacist suggesting I'd been hoarding medication. We confronted him first. "Mr. Green," I said when we arrived at the pharmacy, "did you sign anything for my daughter-in-law?" His face flushed. "She said it was for insurance verification." "I didn't know. She used it to prove I'm mentally unstable." He blanched. "Oh my God. Mrs. Hale, I swear, I didn't mean." "I don't blame you," I said quietly. "But I'll need you to put the truth in writing." He did, trembling the whole time. Next was my neighbor, Mr. Davis, a sour man who always complained about everything from lawn height to parking. He'd told the court I screamed at imaginary visitors. I screamed, I told him calmly, because your driveway was filled with my son and his wife breaking into my home. He smirked. "You're always yelling about something, Iris." Maybe they're right. I wanted to scream again, but I didn't. I just walked away. Some battles weren't worth my breath. The weeks before the trial felt endless. Every day I woke with a knot in my stomach. May visited constantly, bringing tea and comfort. She even gathered her friends from the garden club: Cynthia, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda, women with kind faces and stories that mirrored mine in eerie ways. Maria had cut off her brother after he drained her savings. Carmen's daughter had tried to get her declared unfit to manage her own estate. Alfreda, the eldest at 80, had rewritten her will 3 times to protect herself from her grandchildren. They listened as I told my story, nodding, sighing, reaching for my hands when my voice shook. "You're not crazy, Iris," Alfreda said. "You're just no longer a victim. That scares people who profit from your weakness." Her words stayed with me. I painted them that night in flowing script across a canvas: "Freedom frightens the ungrateful." 2 days before the hearing, I visited Dr. Moore, a psychiatrist Mr. Weber recommended. She had calm eyes, sharp and kind. For 2 hours, she asked me questions, gave me memory tests, and made me do small puzzles that reminded me of grade school. At the end, she smiled. "Mrs. Hale, your cognitive function is exceptional. You're not only competent, you're sharp as a tack." "Tell that to my son," I said. "Oh, I will," she replied dryly. In court. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. The night before the trial, I barely slept. I walked through my house, touching everything I owned: the framed photos, the worn armchair, the books lined up neatly on the shelf. It wasn't just furniture, it was my life, every memory and sacrifice wrapped in wood and fabric. They wanted to take that away. I stood at the window, watching the lights flicker across the neighborhood. Somewhere, Leo and Sierra were probably rehearsing their lies, telling themselves they were justified. Maybe they even believed it. I thought about the little boy Leo once was, the one who used to sneak into my bed during thunderstorms, clutching a stuffed bear, whispering, "Don't let go, Mom." I had never let go. Until now. The morning of the hearing, May arrived at dawn. She hugged me tightly. "Remember who you are," she whispered. "I'm trying." "No. You're knowing. There's a difference." At the courthouse, the air was thick with tension. I saw Leo in a new suit, his expression set in practiced concern. Sierra was beside him, dressed in black, eyes glossy with rehearsed sorrow. Their lawyer looked polished and smug, the kind of man who believed empathy was a weakness. When the judge entered, everyone stood. My knees trembled, but I straightened my back. I would not let them see fear. Their lawyer spoke first. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a case of an elderly woman being manipulated by outsiders. Mrs. Hale has cut off her loving family, displayed paranoid behavior, and fallen under the influence of individuals who clearly have ulterior motives." He said it all with such conviction that for a second, even I almost believed him. Then Sierra took the stand. She cried through most of her testimony, painting me as a confused woman who had always been like a second mother but had recently become distant and suspicious. When Mr. Weber cross-examined, he asked simply, "Mrs. Hale, when was the last time you spoke to Iris without asking for money?" Sierra blinked. "We talk about many things." "Specific date, please." I don't remember." "And is it true you told her she wasn't invited to your wedding because it was for special people?" Her mouth tightened. "That's out of context." "What context makes that acceptable?" Mr. Weber asked calmly. She had no answer. Leo was next. He kept his composure longer, but the cracks showed. "My mother's always been generous," he said. "But lately, she's been irrational. We just want to help her." "How much has she given you in the past 3 years?" Mr. Weber asked. "I don't know, maybe $33,400. Does that sound right?" Leo hesitated. "Maybe." "Do you have a job, Mr. Hale?" "Not right now." "So your 71-year-old mother has been paying your rent, your groceries, your medical bills, and your vacations. And when she stopped, you filed a lawsuit to declare her insane?" The courtroom was silent. Leo's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. I looked at my son and for a fleeting second saw the boy he used to be flicker behind his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the man who valued comfort over conscience. When it was my turn to testify, my hands shook as I was sworn in. I took a deep breath and looked directly at the judge. "For years, I believed that giving was love," I began. "That if I kept helping my son, he would see me, appreciate me. I paid his rent, bought his furniture, filled his fridge. I thought I was supporting him. But I wasn't. I was enabling him to forget I was his mother." I told the court about the wedding, the betrayal, the confrontation, and the false accusations. My voice broke only once, when I described seeing the wedding photos without me in them. Mr. Weber asked gently, "Why did you stop giving them money?" "Because I finally realized what they were taking wasn't just money. It was my dignity." The judge listened intently. When I finished, there was a long, heavy silence. Dr. Moore testified next, confirming my mental clarity and excellent health. Mr. Green, the pharmacist, explained how he had been tricked. Even Mr. Summers, the hardware store owner, testified that I had been perfectly rational when arranging my home security. Then May spoke. "I've seen Iris rebuild her life piece by piece," she said. "She's not paranoid. She's protecting herself. And she's the most lucid, compassionate woman I've met in years." By the time she finished, even the court stenographer had tears in her eyes. The opposing lawyer tried one last time to paint me as delusional, but his arguments fell flat. Truth has a weight that lies can't imitate. When both sides rested, the judge said he'd deliver his decision the next morning. The weight that night was unbearable. May stayed with me, making tea neither of us drank. "What if he sides with them?" I whispered. "He won't," she said firmly. "He's seen your heart." The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Leo avoided my gaze. Sierra whispered frantically to her lawyer. My pulse hammered in my ears. Judge Miller cleared his throat. After reviewing the evidence, testimony, and expert evaluations, he began, this court finds that Mrs. Iris Hale is fully competent to manage her personal and financial affairs. My breath caught. He continued, voice steady. Furthermore, the court recognizes a concerning pattern of financial exploitation by the petitioners. Therefore, the request for guardianship is denied in full. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Sierra turned pale. Leo slumped in his chair, his face a mixture of relief and defeat. The judge looked directly at them. Family should protect, not plunder. This case is a warning to those who confuse love with entitlement. I didn't cry until I stepped outside the courthouse. May hugged me, whispering, "You did it. You won." But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. That night, I sat in the same kitchen where this nightmare had begun months ago. The clock ticked softly. I looked around at my quiet house, my own fortress of peace. I thought about Leo and Sierra, what they might be saying, how they would twist this to make themselves the victims. But it no longer mattered. I had finally stopped needing their version of love. I poured myself a cup of tea, the steam curling like breath. "Robert," I whispered, "our boy grew up wrong, but I finally grew up right." For the first time in years, I slept without fear. The morning after the verdict, sunlight crept through the curtains like a shy guest. For the first time in months, the light didn't hurt my eyes. I sat up slowly, feeling a strange stillness inside me, a silence that wasn't emptiness but peace. I made tea, the same brand I'd drunk for 40 years, and carried it to the porch. The air smelled of wet soil and jasmine again. The world had kept moving through my storm, now it was waiting for me to catch up. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was the weight of everything that had broken before I finally stood up for myself. Winning had not brought joy, it had brought understanding. The kind that doesn't sparkle, it glows quietly inside you, like embers after a fire. May called before breakfast. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I kept thinking about you." "I'm fine," I told her. "Just free." "That's more than fine," she said softly. "That's living." The next week, I received the court's official documents confirming that the case was closed and sealed. I held the papers for a long moment before sliding them into a drawer. They were proof, not of my sanity, but of my strength. A few days later, I went to the cemetery. Robert's grave was shaded by an oak tree, the stone worn smooth by years of rain. I knelt, brushing away a layer of leaves. "Robert," I whispered, "it's over. They tried to take everything, but they couldn't take me." A breeze stirred, warm and soft, carrying the scent of lilac. I liked to think it was his way of saying he'd been watching all along. I told him everything, the betrayal, the trial, the victory. And then I told him about the new me, the woman he would have wanted me to be. "I used to think love meant giving until there was nothing left," I said. "But real love, it starts with giving yourself permission to exist." I left fresh lilies on his grave, white as forgiveness. When I came home, May was waiting on my porch with a wicker basket. "Lunch," she said. "You've been skipping meals again." "I'm not hungry." "You will be," she smiled, pushing past me into the kitchen. Over sandwiches and iced tea, she told me about her daughter's new baby. I listened, smiling, letting her voice fill the space that had once echoed with silence. "You should visit them," she said. "You need a change of scenery." "I might," I answered, surprising myself with the honesty of it. I hadn't gone anywhere in years except the bank and the grocery store. That night, I pulled out an old map and spread it on the table. There were still so many places I'd promised myself I'd see. I circled Paris, Vienna, Florence, names that once sounded like fairy tales but now felt like invitations. The months that followed became the first chapter of a different life. I sold my house, the one that had been both sanctuary and battlefield, and moved into a bright apartment near the city center. People told me I was brave for starting over at 72, but bravery had nothing to do with it. I was simply done surviving. I wanted to live. May helped me pack. When we reached the last box, I found the rose chiffon dress I'd bought for Sierra's wedding. I held it up against the light. It looked softer than I remembered, fragile but still beautiful. "What are you going to do with it?" May asked. "I think I'll wear it one day," I said. "Not for anyone else, for me." She smiled. "Then promise me I'll be there to see it." My new apartment overlooked the river. Every morning, sunlight spilled across the water, painting ripples of gold on the ceiling. I filled the space with plants and canvases, small reminders that life still grew and art still healed. I joined an art class downtown, filled with retirees who laughed too loud and painted too much. There I met Lucia, an exuberant widow who wore scarves like declarations of war against boredom. She introduced me to her circle, people who read poetry, traveled together, and spoke of love as something that belonged to every age. One evening, after class, Lucia took my hand. "You have sad eyes," she said matter-of-factly. "You need to dance again." "I've never been good at dancing." "That's not the point. The point is to move." So I did. That Friday, she dragged me to a small jazz club by the river. The music was warm and alive, the kind that makes your heart beat in rhythm with strangers. When she pulled me to the dance floor, I laughed until I cried. It felt like shaking dust off my soul. Meanwhile, the ghosts of the past still hovered. Leo tried to contact me twice after the trial. The first was a short, stilted voicemail. "Mom, I'm sorry. We were under a lot of pressure. Can we talk?" I deleted it without replying. The second came months later, a handwritten letter, messy and desperate. "We've lost everything," it said. "Sierra's left me. I just need help getting back on my feet. Please, Mom, I'll pay you back." I stared at the letter for a long time. Part of me wanted to cradle it, to imagine that the words "please, Mom" meant love instead of need. But I'd learned better. I burned the letter in the sink. The paper curled and blackened, and as the ashes fell, I whispered, "I hope you find yourself the way I did." Forgiveness, I realized, didn't mean opening the door again. It meant locking it with peace in your heart. 6 months later, I found myself in Paris. The air smelled of rain and pastries. Standing on a bridge over the Seine, I watched the water glisten beneath the streetlights. It was my first trip abroad, something I had promised myself decades ago but never dared to do. I thought of Leo then, of the years I had spent saving him from every fall. I wondered what he was doing, if he was working, if he had changed. But the thought no longer hurt, it was just another current flowing away beneath the bridge. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Freedom isn't the absence of love, it's the presence of self-respect." When I returned home, May was waiting with flowers and tears. "You look 10 years younger," she said. "I feel 100 years wiser." We spent that evening on her porch, drinking tea and watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. Her daughter joined us later, bringing photos of the baby. The laughter that filled that small porch felt like music, soft and healing. It struck me then how different love felt when it was genuine. It didn't demand or drain, it simply existed, quietly nourishing. A year after the trial, I received a letter from my lawyer, Mr. Weber. He had nominated me to speak at a conference on elder financial abuse. "Your case," he wrote, "has inspired many to reclaim their independence." The thought terrified me. Me, speaking on a stage? But then I remembered all the women who had held my hand through the darkness. May, Alfreda, Maria, Carmen, Cynthia. If sharing my story could help even one of them feel less alone, it was worth it. The day of the conference, I wore the rose chiffon dress. Standing behind the podium, I looked out at a sea of faces, some young, some lined with years, and began. My name is Iris Hale, I said, my voice steady. I'm 72 years old, and a year ago, my own son tried to declare me insane. Gasps rippled through the room, but I kept going. I told them everything, the love, the giving, the betrayal, and finally, the moment I chose myself. I learned, I said at the end, that freedom is not something someone gives you. It's something you decide you deserve. And when you decide that, no one, not even family, can take it away. When I stepped off the stage, people stood and applauded. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't the kind that sting. They were the kind that cleanse. After the conference, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, her hands shaking slightly as she spoke. My father controls everything I do, she said. My money, my choices. I thought that's what love was. But after hearing you, I think I need to start living my own life. I hugged her. Start today, I whispered. You'll be afraid, but do it anyway. One day you'll thank the woman you're about to become. As she walked away, I realized something profound. The pain I'd endured had not been wasted. It had become a bridge for others. The years that followed passed like pages in a novel I finally wanted to read. May and I traveled together, to Italy, to Greece, to the countryside where olive trees whispered secrets older than both of us. She laughed louder than anyone I'd ever known. Sometimes, late at night, we'd sit under the stars, two old women sipping wine and talking about our younger selves, the ones who thought love was sacrifice, who apologized for taking up space. Do you ever miss them? She asked one night. Who? The people we used to be. I thought for a moment. Sometimes. But I wouldn't trade who I am now to get them back. Every so often, memories of Leo still drifted in. Not like ghosts, more like faded photographs you find between book pages. I hoped he'd learn to stand on his own, to build a life that didn't depend on taking from others. Maybe one day he would call, not to ask for money, but just to say, "Hi, Mom, I'm doing okay." And if that day came, I'd answer, not with anger, not with regret, but with the quiet strength of a woman who finally knew her worth. On the second anniversary of the trial, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. May, Lucia, the garden club ladies, and a few neighbors who had become friends. We shared wine, laughter, and stories of resilience. At midnight, May raised her glass. To Iris, she said, who taught us that saying no is just another way of saying yes, to yourself. Everyone cheered. I felt my eyes well up, but I didn't hide the tears. They were part of my joy now. That night, after everyone left, I stepped onto the balcony. The city glittered below, alive and endless. I looked up at the stars and whispered a promise to myself, I will never shrink again. A few weeks later, I began writing. What started as journal entries turned into full stories, about women like me, about freedom, about finding light after years of darkness. I posted them online under a simple title, Tin Tea Tales. The name came from the nights May and I spent drinking tea from old tin cups while telling stories that made us laugh until we cried. To my surprise, people started reading. They wrote to me, sharing their own pain and victories. Some said my words gave them courage to leave abusive marriages, to confront manipulative families, to choose themselves. Every message felt like a heartbeat echoing mine. I had once been silenced by shame and fear, now my voice was helping others find theirs. One afternoon, as I was answering comments, a notification popped up, a donation from someone named Leo H. There was a note attached. I read your story. I'm sorry for everything. I'm trying to be better. I hope you're happy. My breath caught. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back only one sentence. I am. And it was the truth. That evening, I brewed tea in my favorite tin cup and sat by the window. The sky outside was streaked with pink and gold, the city hummed soft beneath it. I thought of Robert, of May, of every woman who had walked through fire to rediscover her reflection. I lifted my cup to the fading light. To the special people, I murmured. The ones we become when we finally choose ourselves. The tea tasted like peace. Here at Tinty Tales, every story is brewed slow and served warm, made for listeners who savor meaning in every word. So please, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me which part of Iris's journey spoke to you the most. Your reflections help this little storytelling corner keep glowing. This is Tinty Tales. Pour a cup, and I'll pour a story.